Today we're tackling a common kitchen conundrum, seasoning slip-ups. Stick around to learn some tips and tricks on how to save your potential meal disasters. Welcome to or back to PB with J, where we delve into all things plant-based delicious, from recipe reviews to my own recipes and informational things like this. Ever find yourself with a dish that's just not quite hitting all those flavor notes that you wanted? Too bland, too spicy, too salty? Well, fear not, because I've got you covered with some tips and tricks to rescue your meals from Blandsville or flavor overload. So whether you're a culinary rookie or a seasoned pro, seasoned, get it, seasonings like spices, nope, moving on. Stick around, because I'm going to show you how to elevate all of your dishes to a flavorful paradise. Your mouth and your brain. It depends on how you experience flavor. I guess it's a combination. Yeah. I'm not a science guy, really. Before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out to some of our audience members. Jolie from Kenosha, Wisconsin, Madison from Louisiana, Darren from Mississippi Mills, Canada, Patty from Southern California, Susan from West Virginia, Cheryl from Arizona, Suzanne from Alabama, Martha from Louisville, Kentucky, Terry from Butte, Montana, and Dan from, you didn't say where you're from, Dan, but I know where you are from on the internet. You're from the Mighty Network. What is the Mighty Network? Well, that is where we have our members only group for this channel. It's like PB with J 2.0. For the price of a crappy cup of coffee, you get access to these videos early, you get bumped up onto the shoutout list, members only live streams, and not to mention an awesome members only community with like-minded people who love to share information, recipes, and everything in between. And I'm in there every day chatting y'all up. If you want to support the channel in another way, you can hit that thanks or super thanks button down below, whatever it's called, and consider visiting our merch store for fun shirts like this. If you enjoyed this video or any of the tips and tricks that I mentioned, hit that like button to let YouTube know to share it with other people. And if you're not subscribed, consider doing so as well. All right, let's talk about your meal disasters. Let's kick things off with a common kitchen mishap: blandness. If your dish is about as exciting as watching paint dry, don't worry. The secret weapon, a little bit of salt, a little sprinkle. Start slow. A little sprinkle can do a lot to unlock flavors. Now, for those of you that are trying to live on an SOS diet or reduce your sodium intake, other things that you can consider are a little bit of miso paste, if it's like a broth or a soup of some kind, sprinkling on some nori, which is like seaweed paper stuff. You can buy it in the Asian section of your supermarket. And if you want to just cut out salty, flavory things altogether, dive back into your seasoning drawer and look through your spices and think about what you can pump up. Maybe there's some spices already in the dish, add more of those. Also consider that maybe if you haven't refreshed your spices in a long time, that your spices have lost flavor and maybe you need to replace them. Worst case scenario, a little bit of nutritional yeast and a hot sauce of your choice can fix a lot of sins. So maybe you went the other way and your dish is a little bit on the intense side, flavor-wise. We've all been there, right? Maybe we read the recipe wrong, or we were experimenting and maybe we went a little bit overboard on the spices. Or maybe we grabbed the wrong one and we need to dial it back. Whatever the reason. The first tip is to, read your recipes properly and make sure you're adding the appropriate amount of spices. Generally speaking, if this is some kind of a soup or a broth or a curry or anything liquidy, consider just adding some vegetable stock to thin it out a little bit. Or if it's a sauce, a little bit more whatever your base is. If it's a cream or tomato sauce, consider adding a little bit more of that. Worst case scenario, serve it with something bland like whole grain rice or quinoa or bread, pasta. It might help balance it out a little bit. When your dish leaves you feeling like you just licked a salt lick, it's time to bring out the acid squad. A splash of citrus like lemon, lime, orange, grapefruit juice, or a vinegar of your choice. Depending on what you're making, you might just want to stick to something simple like apple cider, but if it's something that has a little more tang to it, maybe you want some balsamic vinegar in there. You do you. Depending on the recipe, you could also go for something creamy like a cashew cream, a silken tofu, vegan yogurt, coconut milk. A lot of these things are going to help mask that saltiness and bring down the overall sodium flavor explosion thing that's going on. And if it's a recipe book you have or your own recipe, maybe just make a little note. Less salt next time. Are you feeling the heat? Maybe sometimes things get a little too spicy for your own comfort. Fear not, friends. Sweet, acidic, and creamy ingredients will be your spicy saviors. For sweetness, consider things like maple syrup, coconut sugar, agave. Although be careful with agave because depending on where you're getting it from, people have reported that it's not necessarily a vegan product. If you're plant-based, maybe you don't care. For acid, consider some of the swaps we already talked about, like a citrus or vinegar. And for creamy, same thing. Some of the things we already mentioned, like a cashew cream, silken tofu, an avocado. Things like that will cool your dish down like a winter breeze. And like a similar suggestion I made when it comes to too much flavor, you could also consider serving this with something bland like a whole grain rice, pasta, bread. You do you. And on the flip side, if your dish is too mild, maybe you want to kick it up a notch. Channel that inner spice master you got going on and amp up the heat with a hot sauce of your choice. If you think you don't like hot sauce, try buying a really mild one and just adding a little bit. Especially if you are 30s and above, our taste buds tend to dull and die a little bit as we get older, so we do need flavors to be a little bit more intense as we go. Kids are the other way around. You could also just use some chili pepper, maybe a little cayenne pepper. Trust me, your taste buds will thank you. And remember, add it in slowly. And if it gets too spicy, rewind this video back to my last tip. When life hands you lemons, your dish ends up too sour. My go-to tip is to add a little bit of sweetness. Consider any of the sources we already mentioned in this video, like maple syrup, coconut sugar, agave, whatever else you can think of that might be appropriate to this dish. Maybe it's a little bit of fruit puree. Those sweet saviors will help bring balance back to your dish. And last but not least, the bitterness of bitter. I didn't plan that one well, sorry. If your dish leaves a bitter taste in your mouth, fat is your friend. And for those that are worried about having fat in your diet, remember your body needs healthy amounts of fat. We're talking about whole food sources, things like nuts and nut butters, avocados, nut creams, nut milks. And if that doesn't do the trick, consider just a little bit of sweetness from the sources we've already mentioned. And there you have it, folks. With a little bit of extra seasoning here, a dollop of fat there, and a little bit of sweetness or some acid on top, you're gonna be mastering and fixing your culinary disasters in no time. But please remember, cooking is about experimentation. Get in your kitchen, try things, make mistakes. That's how you learn. And if you make a real stinker, try to fix it using some of the tips in this video. Until next time, keep it plant-based and flavorful. And if you have any tips that I didn't mention here that you want to share with our audience, leave a comment down below. Like this video if you found it helpful to let YouTube know to share it with other people. Subscribe if you haven't done so yet. And check out this video next. YouTube's been nagging me. They're like, this person hasn't watched this video yet, Jeremy. What's going on? This is one of your best videos. And it's just sitting there. And they're not watching it. And YouTube's sad. And I am too, a little bit.